Hi, good afternoon. I'm Bart Paulson, and I'm glad to be here for my Data is for Doing office hours, where today I'm talking about what I call AI for the 99%. And I'll explain what all that means in just a moment, but I want to thank you for joining me here. And I want to mention two things. Number one, I am recording this session and it'll be available immediately afterwards on LinkedIn, on YouTube, and on Facebook. And so you can access it there. And if you're watching the video, thank you for joining me at a time that works well for you. And if you're here live, I want to invite you to do one thing, and that is just get on, make a comment, and say hello and tell me where you are. I am in Salt Lake City, Utah, in the Western United States, where it is currently 2 in the afternoon, and it is very, very hot outside. And I'll be riding my bike back up the hill to get home. But I'd love to hear from you and know where you are. And let me get started with what I want to talk about today. The idea here is about AI in general. Now, I make a lot of courses, for example, for both Data Lab and that's my company, and for LinkedIn Learning on data science and statistics and on AI. And I know that AI is a huge, huge topic, and there is so much news about AI in the news and social media on LinkedIn and other places that it feels like it's taking over the entire world. And I want to talk a little bit about how AI works for people who are not in major tech companies. Because most of the news we hear is about the companies who are developing AI or the massive corporations who are implementing it at this gargantuan scale. And so I want to talk not about them, but for everybody else who's not in one of those giant companies. So I'm thinking about, for instance, my university students. I teach at Utah Valley University, and they'll be using AI both while they're students and when they get out and they're running their jobs. I'm thinking about people in small businesses, solo practitioners, or even people at large companies, but who are not developers and who are not specifically tasked with AI kind of responsibilities, but about how they can use some of this uh, technology to make their lives and their work a little easier, a little more productive. And let me just take a moment here. We got Connie clocking in from Chula Vista. Thank you so much. And Vamshi in Texas, and Neelam in Boston, and Abdi Rahman, who at this moment gets the long traveling award for being from Somalia. Thank you so much for being here. And one of the really great things about doing these live office hours is that they do reach people from all around the world. And so I'm so grateful that you're here with me right now. So let's start by looking at a presentation. I've created a short presentation. I'm going to walk through that. And if time permits, we can talk a little bit more afterwards. So here is my presentation, AI for the 99%. And this is drawing off of a presentation I gave last year, which was data science for the 99%. And the idea is that a lot of the principles and practices of data science are applicable to people who are not full-time data scientists. And a lot of that, mostly I mean, is data work in general. And here I'm using AI in a very general sense as well. I mean, when people think about AI, they think about like a magic lantern and genies and pixie dust coming out, and that you can solve anything in the world if you just kind of throw AI at it. Well, I mean, people have been saying that same thing about machine learning, about data science, about big data, about statistics, about printed words, about the internet. Been saying about a lot of things. And while it's true there have been huge changes over time, it's also true that so many of these things, it's the potential that's really there, and it's not evenly distributed in terms of its impact or how people can draw off of it. Now, when I talk about AI, I'm not talking about magic lanterns. I mean, seriously, according to some people, even something like Clippy from Microsoft Office, kind of counts. By the way, I think I'm the only person in the world who actually liked Clippy and would use it, 30 years ago. But I'm talking about a technological assistant. Now, really want to talk about AI, I'm mostly talking about generative AI. So here's a little flow chart that shows how a generative AI agent works with specifically the green one there in the middle, the LLM for the large language model is the defining characteristic of modern generative AI. And that's mostly what I'm going to be talking about today. And it makes things possible like generating these faces. This is a timeline of images from 2014 up to 22 of things going from very fuzzy, and you can tell that's a little bit off, to getting to photorealistic and then even impossible photorealistic images. And again, that's from 3 years ago. And so things change dramatically all the time. But this is some of the stuff. I'm going to be talking about this a little bit, and I'll just mention for the first time ever, I actually use some generative AI images in the presentation. I usually don't, but it seemed relevant for this particular presentation. But let me explain what I mean mostly by the 99%. And here's some data. Again, it's from a year or two ago, and I'm talking here about the United States, where I am. And if you look at the number of businesses, not the size of the business, but a head count, the number of businesses in the US who have no employees beyond the business owner, so solo businesses, that's 27 million businesses in the US. Those with either 1 up to 499 employees, because the cutoff for a small business in the US is 500 employees. That's another 6 million. And in terms of businesses with over 500 employees, you can't even see the bar there. There's only 20,000. And it's a microscopic amount. And in fact, really it means when we're talking about solo practices or small or medium businesses, we're really talking about the 99.94%. Large businesses are only 0.06% of businesses in the US. Now, if you look at headcount, it's a little bit different because the big businesses have lots of people. Some of them have over 1 million employees. So if we start at the bottom of this one, you see that the large businesses in the US, at least as of a couple of years ago, have about 30 million employees, just a little over. So that's large, and that's not much more than the 27 million businesses with solo practitioners, just the individuals. But what you see is that small to medium businesses, again, 1 to 500 employees, 499, those account for nearly 100 million employed workers in the United States. So that is by far the biggest category. And the reason this matters is those businesses generally do not have full-time machine learning or AI or data science people. And instead, I'll show you. I got examples. I mean, think about the businesses around you. I ride my bike here, I pass 100 businesses on the way in, and I share this space with a lot of small businesses. I mean, think about things like bakeries and breweries. Think about doctors and lawyers and dentists. Think about architects and contractors and landscapers. Think about performing arts groups. I've collaborated with nearly all of these in one way or another, and most of them fall into small businesses. Again, fewer than 500 people, often maybe just a handful. I know doctors and lawyers who are solo practitioners. And so these are examples of the group of people that I'm talking about in their work. Now, some of the questions they're asking about are not how to maximize shareholder revenue and how to have this massive exponential growth, getting ready for some initial public offering on the NASDAQ stock exchange. Rather, they're trying to answer questions like, what days and times should we be open? How can we simplify our record keeping? How do we connect with donors? If you're in the nonprofit space, that's kind of your major question. What are our most popular products and services, and how can we help our audience? Now, the nice thing is, these are the same examples I used when talking about data science for the 99%, but they also connect with AI. And AI is an additional tool that can be used to help small and medium businesses address some of these most important issues for them. So, specifically, what can they do? Well, I'm going to give a few suggestions. Number one is I want to say that I specifically focus on commonly available tools, and I've used this little set of priorities elsewhere. When working with data, for most people, it helps to start with spreadsheets. Now, I know in the data science world, a lot of people, they frown upon spreadsheets. It's like telling them to tie their shoes or something. But I have this belief that spreadsheets account for the majority of data sets in the world. And the other thing is, basically, spreadsheets are available on every computer in the world. And especially if you're using an online version like Google Sheets, it's there, it's available, and most people know how to use them at least a little bit. And it's my firm belief that for most people, going from using no data at all to using a simple data set that fits into a spreadsheet, you've accomplished a massive change in their operations. And the general recommendation I give when working with data, and the same thing applies to AI, is use spreadsheets unless and until they no longer work easily for your purposes. Then move to a data app. In statistical analysis, that usually means something like SPSS or Jamovi. And then use that unless and until it no longer accomplishes what you need easily. And at that point, move on to a programming language. Start coding in something like Python or R. Because I come from the data analysis world, R is my tool of choice, but there are so many others available. The point of this is you can use AI functionality in all of them, in spreadsheets, in apps like SPSS and Jamovi, and of course in coding languages like Python and R. Now, in terms of making AI available to the 99%, I'm going to suggest one thing. Number one is that you favor no code solutions where they don't have to type lines, they don't have to write commands, and it's just something that they use words and they say what they want, and also nothing that requires an API, an application programming interface. So for instance, I sometimes try to use generative AI when I'm working in RStudio because I know that AI offers a lot when writing code. On the other hand, to do it, you have to download a package and then you have to log in with an API to a kind of paid account, and it's a huge pain. And so I never end up using it. Instead, I end up doing something much simpler, and that is I open up multiple windows and I use, for instance, a web interface for ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini. Many different options. I have experience with about 6 different generative AI programs. And I write my question in one, I get the answer, and then I copy and paste it into the other. And while I know that that strikes against the integration that most people want, it does make it much easier for most people because they know how to work the web interface of their AI program of choice, and they know how to copy and paste, and they know how to stick it into the other thing. And you don't run up against rate limits or pricing or the complications of APIs as you go through things. And so I like to just say copy and paste and do it from a free web app. I have paid accounts on a couple of different generative AI programs, but that shouldn't be necessary for most of what we're talking about here because they're not giant, enormous things. So I want to say specifically about the levels of help that the 99%, the individuals, the small and medium businesses can get from AI. And I put it into 2 different categories, micro and macro. Or really you want very detailed and very abstract high level. So micro uses for AI, for a small and medium business, for an individual, that can include things like generating text for social media or for your website or for other things you're sharing. That's one common use. I'm going to have a major qualification on that in a minute. along with images for use in social media. Again, the first time ever in my life, I tried generating some images for this particular presentation. They worked out pretty well. And you can get something very specific if you want. And the idea there is you tell, for instance, if you're working in Google Sheets like I am, you've got Gemini built in, and you just write a sentence describing what you want, and you get it. And it might be easier than spending some time looking around on a stock footage site to see what you can get. Another nice thing about using generative AI for these micro uses is that they're able to summarize text. Maybe you've got a lot of feedback from customers or from potential customers, and you can ask it to summarize. Or maybe you've got this giant article or book that you're reading, or somebody's written something that's very complicated. AI is absolutely fabulous at summarizing that text. It can also take a large section of orders or a spreadsheet, and it can summarize it. Those are beautiful things, making your life a lot simpler. I love it on my phone. I've got an iPhone, and how it will summarize the text messages and notifications I get. Or when I use Gmail, it can summarize the emails in the list. I know that's a really small thing, but in terms of making your life easier, it's a big help. And that's a constructive use of AI to help reduce some of the administrative burden of life. And then I mentioned two others here that maybe don't come immediately to your mind. AI can be really good for helping to write Excel formulas. Sometimes you're trying to do something a little complicated in Excel, and also because Excel works on this nested thing where you have command in the middle, then you wrap around it, then you wrap around it, then you wrap around it. Things can get complicated really quickly. And since I recommend that most people do their data work in a spreadsheet like Excel or Google Sheets, well, tell it what you're trying to accomplish. If you're in Google Sheets, Gemini will just pop right up there on the side. Tell it what you're trying to do, and it can help you immediately. And then this other one is VBA code. That is specific to Excel. It's Visual Basic for Applications, and it's a programming language that can be used in Microsoft Office applications. There are parallels in Google Docs and Google Sheets and stuff like that. I think it's called ActionScript. I've used it a few times. The reason I mention this is because VBA allows some really high-powered automation skills in a spreadsheet or in Microsoft Word. I've only used it a couple of times, but I know that there are people who this is a lifesaver for them, and they use it all day, every day. The nice thing about it is, it's a programming language, so there are some very specific things, but a generative AI can help you both write complicated formulas for use in a spreadsheet and can help you write the scripting, the VBA or the ActionScript, to help automate some of your workload. And that, I think, is a real time saver for a person who's operating on their own, or they're in a small business and they're feeling overwhelmed. The next one is a kind of a funny one, regex. That stands for regular expressions for doing Excel searches, or really for doing in Google Sheets. Microsoft Excel has its own special way of doing wildcard characters, but Google Sheets, which is what I should have written here, uses regular expressions, and those are completely cryptic, but they're very, very powerful for finding particular patterns in your data. And if you're trying to find customers who have particular kinds of addresses, who have ordered something in the past, or who, comments of a particular line, a regular expression can make life very, very easy, but it's really super hard to write them for most people. And again, it looks completely cryptic. Nobody knows what it is. And so using a generative AI program to write the regular expressions so you can paste them directly into your search in Google Sheets is going to make your life a lot easier. And so that's, in terms of micro uses, in terms of very specific tasks, getting technical help from generative AI can be a great one. Now, I know that in the big tech world, people use it a lot for programming to create applications and so on. And yeah, sure, great. I just don't think that the majority of people in small and medium businesses are doing those particular tasks, which is why I didn't recommend them here. But these are some possibilities. By the way, if you're in a small business that creates apps, obviously you're going to be using generative AI to help you do your coding, but that's going to be a relatively small percentage of companies. Now, what about macro uses? This is where we're getting away from like, write this code or solve this specific problem to me. And this is one of the places where I think AI can really shine in terms of helping people. AI is great at operating at this really large abstract level. You can ask it for advice on your priorities. It works to go in there and say, hey, look, I've got 5 potential projects and I have to decide how to divvy up my time or which ones to take. And you can ask it to guide you through the decision-making process. Ask it to help what your strengths are, the things that are difficult for you. And especially if you've been using an AI for a long time, it has your chat history in there and it will be able to draw on the things that you said previously. And so using generative AI to help you sort through the tasks you have and which ones to do, which ones not to do can be a great way. Also, creative thinking, say, I'm trying to solve this particular problem, and here's a couple of things I came up with, but help guide me through some outside of the box thinking. And so maybe it will have some ideas, maybe you can come up with your own ideas. Another one is motivation and self-care. It's fair to get up and say, look, I've got this project. I just can't think straight. I don't want to do it. Help me find a way. I know I've told this to my students before. They're taking a class and they say, I hate this. These assignments have nothing to do with anything. And why do I have to do them? And I say, well, aside from the fact that your teacher, assigned them, that's one reason. But I said, but listen, what I tell them is, if you don't see why this matters to you and to your life, that's a question that you can ask the AI. Put the assignment into there. Tell it what you want to do when you grow up and ask it to connect. Why does this matter? And please help me care about it. Also, let me know when I'm getting overwhelmed and help me find a way to be productive if I'm starting to feel overwhelmed. And that might include the AI tells you to take a break, gives you a recommendation, take 5 minutes, take 10 minutes, take a day, and think about these other things. AI can be very helpful as a coach there to help you stay motivated and to help you take care of yourself and to not get overwhelmed, not to stack on too much. Also, the really great thing about AI is because it's not a human, you can share your dumb ideas with it. You can ask your stupid questions and it is judgment free. And there are times, say for instance, I'll type in a question to do a web search and I'll end up in someplace like Reddit or Stack Overflow. And people are mostly nice there. Mostly, but sometimes people get really snarky and then you feel bad about asking a stupid question. Well, the great thing is AI never does that. And so if you have a fundamental question about something that it's important to you, ask the AI and you can get all sorts of levels of feedback on it. And that's one of its great advantages. And then you can also ask it more complicated things like help on calculating the return on investment or ROI for different potential projects or things that you're working on. And that is a version of the first one about advice on creating priorities. Now, I want to say something about that. When you're calculating ROI, sometimes it means you're going to need a little bit of information from outside of your own experience. How likely is a project like this to pay off? How often do these things succeed? How much, money do they make? Because a lot of times people go into something with very unrealistic expectations. They think, I'll create an app and I'll make $1 million a day. Well, the vast majority of phone apps make zero money ever. I mean, the vast majority. And so it's really good to know what is your chance of actually making any money at all, or how long is it going to take, and who's your audience, and what are you competing against? And so to calculate that, you're going to need to do a little bit of external research. And AI can be good for that because, all of the major programs have basically read the entire internet. So they've got all the information and they can summarize it. But as you know, they are also prone to making things up. And so I'm just going to share 3 little pointers. If you're having your AI help do research for you, 3 things you should always do. Number one, always ask for references and always ask for links to the original references. And then because it'll sometimes make up a reference and it'll sometimes make up a link, you need to check that that link actually works. You got to click on it, see if it goes to where you are expecting. And then if it does exist and the link is valid, you need to make sure that it is in fact summarizing that one article, that one source correctly. There are too many examples of AI disasters. Here in the US, I can think of several cases where lawyers and sometimes very big law firms have submitted briefs that included completely made up AI cases. And oh my goodness, they just got themselves nailed by the judges when the judge said, this is not a real case. This did not really happen. This doesn't exist. And I know that doing the case research is excruciatingly boring and time consuming. And AI is really good at summarizing these things, but you must check it at all times. Now, one thing that can be helpful, especially if you're not looking for a specific thing, but if you want general advice, and sometimes I'll do this about things that aren't super critical, like if I'm looking up advice on nutrition for long bicycling rides, because that's something that I do, I'll check more than one AI. I'll sometimes ask 3 different programs and I'll get their advice. And if I get stuff that's consistent across the 3 of them, I think that is probably valid and I can probably go ahead with it. I would never use that for professional work and I would never use it to give me references. Again, I would always ask for a reference with a live link. I would check that it was valid and I would double check the summary of what it said. That's going to be critical. Now, I want to share one really neat thing that I read about at least industry level AI. And it was that this is from a person named Saul Rashidi, and I'm going to say just a tiny bit more about her. But she's on LinkedIn. Well, she's in lots of places, but I read an article that she shared on LinkedIn, and this is like 3 levels of separation because she is quoting somebody from a conference who was summarizing somebody else. And they said that AI was invented to do 4 different things, what they're calling the 4 Ds: the dangerous, the dull, the dirty, and the difficult. Specifically, the dangerous, these are jobs that are too risky. Hopefully you're not confronting any of those. The dull, that's just copy and paste and copy and paste because some things are just too mind numbing. I think this is going to be a big place that most people in the 99%, because they're going to be doing a lot of this really mind-numbing work, that AI for the dull. The dirty is for hazardous conditions. Some conditions are just too toxic and you don't want to be working on it yourself. And then the difficult, where you have massive data processing. Some decisions are just too complex. I like to think of asking for a summary of the whole internet falling into that last category. But I encourage you to go see Saul's post on this. That QR code will take you to the article on LinkedIn, and it leads to that. It also, that same shortcut URL will do it. And then this is my major qualification on using AI to help generate text for social media and to generate images, and that is, please avoid dumpster fires. Don't put trash out there. I assume that I'm not the only person who gets several text messages a day that are obviously spam. Hi, Bob, are we going to have lunch today? And I don't know if AI is involved in that, but I think that AI makes these kind of trash messages a lot easier. Also, generating articles so you can post them that say nothing, like 500 words of just drivel, or social media posts with fake, and obviously don't do stuff that's misleading. Don't do stuff that can land you in court for libel. But just don't waste people's time. One of the easiest things to do with AI is to generate 1,000 social media posts and then automate their posting. And oh my goodness, you've now just destroyed the internet for everybody. Please don't do that. Use it wisely, in moderation, in small quantities, with your own involvement. Stay there, make sure it makes sense. I know people who have been, again, I know people who said, okay, we're going to have to, generate 1,000 variations on something, and they use AI to do it. And then it ends up saying stuff that's impossible and it gets them in trouble. So the answer here is what we're looking for is human in the loop. Humans still need to be involved in the process, in the prompting and in the evaluation, doing quality control. Please just don't turn the AI loose on your social media feed and make the rest of us regret that we're there. So don't do that. Now, in terms of your own project, oh shoot, I've gone over time. I need to wrap it up. I apologize. Let me say a few things. There's a saying from the entrepreneurial world: first, eliminate unneeded tasks, then automate what you can. Third, delegate to others what can be done reasonably well. And I'm going to add a fourth one to that one: and collaborate, specifically collaborating with AI to get your work done, where there's a back and forth between you and the AI, where you give it its ideas, it comes back to you, you ask for clarifications. It makes things possible. And then I want to share just a few things before I go. There's 3 people who I follow on LinkedIn, and I get a lot of great stuff on AI from them. Kazi Korzakov, Saul Rashidi, and John Crone are fabulous resources. Of course, there are many, many others. These are 3 I follow, and almost everything I've read from them I think is a great thing. Often operating at the large scale, again, at the corporate tech company level, but the things can be generalized to even the 99%. And then finally, I have a course on LinkedIn Learning called AI Accountability: Build Responsible and Transparent Systems, that I talk about some of these issues, and I think it'd be worth looking at. And with that, my time is up. Folks, thank you so much for joining me. I see a few other people logged in. Bombale in Seattle, and Stephanie in Scranton, Pennsylvania, Syed and Okibe in Lagos. Thank you so much for joining, all being here. And for those of you, share, we've recorded this. It'll be available again on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook as a video almost immediately afterwards. And you are always welcome to share it with anybody you want. And I would love to hear from you. Connect with me on LinkedIn, share your thoughts with me, and I look forward to continuing this conversation with you in the future. Again, folks, thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day.